We are live on Facebook for the Tuesday edition of the Not Your Average Investor Show. Welcome, everybody. My name is Pablo Gonzalez. I'm your host. With me is the real estate king, investor of Northeast Florida, Jacksonville, and the internet, Greg Cohen. Say hello, Greg.
Hey, guys. Pablo, people are going to think that I put you up to that, brother. You can't keep coming up with bigger and better and more fantastic things.
Buddy, I had settled in on amazing, and you gave me some feedback a couple weeks ago. So now we're gonna keep iterating through until
I've been called the grand poobah and the master of all things real estate on the internet. That's pretty good. I can't wait to see what you come up with next week.
Yeah, well, if you think you're special, just wait till you hear about our guest today, who is the founder and principal consultant at Workplace Synergistics, a management consulting and organizational development firm serving companies from 50 to 5,000 employees in the Southeast. He has been working with JWB for over 12 years. Greg, in our walks, has referred to him as his sensei of all things leadership, his guiding beacon of leadership, and I can't wait to find out all about it. Also has one of the coolest first names that I can imagine, Rusty Bozman. Welcome, Rusty.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's good to be with you guys.
It is a pleasure.
I only meet animals with my name, not people.
and my favorite surf brand of all time. We talk about surfing on this show, just like FYI. All right. So welcome, everybody. As you all know, anybody that's been here before knows that Tuesday is an interview format, right? Today is about the guest, but we want you to get as much value out of Rusty and his brilliant mind as you can. So there's a couple of ways to interact with us. Number one is the chat feature. If you pop open that chat and you go to the blue box that says all panelists, drop that down and put all panelists and attendees so that now everybody's talking to each other and they can see what you're saying. That way you can maybe make a new friend as well. And if you want to have a question asked on the show, click open that Q&A box right there on the bottom right and pop that open, put your questions in there. I'm tracking everything. I'm trying to track we're also live in our Facebook group. I'm going to be checking in on that periodically, but the best place to put a question in to get it on the show is that Q&A box, because if not, I go cross-eyed, but I'm going to do my best either way. And last but not least, if you are looking for more information on rental income properties, you think this may be the next step, you just want to get more educated, you want a free investor toolkit and a breakdown of 4 properties and how they will fit into your portfolio, we have the perfect solution for you. It is jwbwebclass.com, where Greg spent a quality 45 minutes breaking it all down for you so that you understand the best markets, the best practices, what JWB espouses and why they do, and other customers that have done it. It'll be a really, really good use of your time. So I encourage that you go to jwbwebclass.com if you haven't received that free investor toolkit. And without further ado, the leadership Sherpa, the sensei, Rusty, can you tell us how you got involved with JWB, man? It's been 12 years, right?
It has, it possibly longer. One of my mentors was a guy named Hal Resnick, and he was a really amazing guy, great teacher, good friend, an amazing consultant in the Jacksonville area, but also from Boston and all around. And he was working with JWB, and he said, I want to introduce you to some really great guys. They've got an amazing business model. They're very innovative. They're very smart, and they're just all around good guys. And so he introduced me to them. And I think our first thing, Greg, was compensation analysis, if I'm not mistaken. And so from there, we kind of developed a relationship. Sadly, in 2016, Hal passed from pancreatic cancer, but he certainly left his mark on me, and I know he left his mark on JWB in a good way.
Absolutely. Hal, I mean, I'm sorry, geez, channeling Hal here. Rusty, did Hal ever tell you how he came to know of us and how the interview process I ran him through?
Actually, no.
You got to hear this one, man. You're going to love this. So,
okay.
Hal is Hal was an incredible leader. When I think about, the good fortune that we've had in our business, working with Rusty and working with Hal have been just these things that, happened to us, not because we necessarily deserved that chance or that opportunity. It's just really good fortune. And, but if you go back, geez, it was probably 2008. And JWB was struggling at that point, right? We were all in the recession at that point where, you know, we had a lot of properties that had high interest debt on it. We needed to figure out a way to make sure this model worked, and we struggled. And at that point, we realized that we needed some help from somebody like Rusty, somebody like Hal. And so I did what everybody else did. You know, I got a few recommendations, and then I went online and I just researched and Googled real estate business consultant, and I found Hal's website. Now, Hal worked with some of the biggest businesses here locally. I mean, his client list was just incredible. And the first time he came to JWB, it was in our old office, which was about 2,500 square feet.
I remember that.
You remember that office. Yeah. And we had about 40 employees working in 2,500 square feet. And we managed about 500 rental properties at that time. And you would have to like triple park your car because there was only 12 parking spaces.
Yep.
And so here's this high level talent consultant coming in, and I run him through the ringer for an interview. And I just remember, like, I interviewed him. I'm like, hey, listen, tell me why you think you're going to take our business to the next level. What do you think you can? And the guys, I can only imagine what Hal was thinking. Afterwards, you know, he answered my questions, just a gentleman, and politely handed me the book as he left. And I'm like, oh, wow, this guy wrote a book. I probably should have taken it easier on the interview. And from then on, you know, we just kind of, I guess he just was impressed with our act as if mentality and took us under his wing. And man, I'll never forget that interview.
He was definitely impressed. Loved you guys.
Hal gets a lot of love on this show, and and most of the times that they bring up Hal, the other name that's brought up is Rusty, right?
Oh.
So Rusty, the theme today is leading your real estate business through crisis. Mm-hmm. When you came across JWB the first time, would you consider them to have been an organization kind of chaotic, kind of in crisis? What did you find? And tell me what you started working on with them. And kind of like the timeline of that, please.
Sure. Well, the first time I met them, you know, we were just really focused on very specific things. So they were an organization. I think you guys had like 20, 30 people. I actually found the old census not too long ago. I think there was 32 people on it. So it was a pretty small company at the old office, Triple Park, 16 spots. And we did a comp analysis, but they were growing really fast. And so year over year, they were fastest 40 under 40, and they were, you know, Inc. Recognized as being one of the fastest growing companies. And so any company that's growing really quickly has things that they have to immediately address. You know, you can't just one-off everything when the volume starts getting bigger and bigger. So you got to start putting processes, standards, policies, best practices in place, you know, without making it too constrained or too rigid that you're going to stifle growth and innovation and creativity. And so, you know, we started out with some comp structure and some basic, you know, comp components, and then we moved into different structures, different organizational structures. We kicked around a lot of really creative things. They were doing some really, really innovative things with investment options for people. You had the fund that you created, which was really exciting. We even kicked around creating a fund for employees to invest in. And the thing that struck me right away was how much they cared about the people that worked there. I mean, it was just palpable when you were talking with them. And all the questions that they asked, they were asking from the perspective of how can we be better? Tell us what we're not doing right or what we're not doing well enough. You know, it's very rare that you find executives, let alone owners of a business, that are willing to look at themselves, to really look at what is my part in the results that we're getting or not getting. And so we started working on those types of things. We did some leadership development. We did some training. We have installed the predictive index, which is one of the assessment tools that I use in my practice. And we've had some pretty good success with that. We use that for hiring, selection, as well as self-awareness and managing relationships, developing people. And so we've done some work like that. We've done emotional intelligence work where we've done some assessments, especially when we're considering people for promotion or to take on new roles, to help people understand themselves better. I mean, ultimately, it just comes down to understanding yourself and understanding the people that work for you and meeting them where they are. Marcus Buckingham said, good managers play chess or checkers, and they just sort of expect that all the pieces moved in the same way. Great managers play chess, and they realize that the people on their team are not all the same. And so the way that I move and motivate and reward people on my team are going to be unique to that piece in my team. And so, they really embrace that and have done a great job. And since then, we've done some other projects. I think the beginning of this year, Greg, we did a diversity and inclusion analysis. So this was before all of the protests. This was before, God rest his soul, George Floyd. They approached me and several others to take bids on how can we do a better job of being more inclusive, of having more diversity in our workforce. And so we did several analyses on that, and we're pretty pleased with the results. And the beauty of it is, of course, they're not done. They're still focused on it.
So when I think of JWB, Rusty, and everything that you're saying, right, makes a ton of sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I've said 1,000 times, I'm walking into that Tuesday morning meeting, I feel like I'm walking into an MBA case study for organizational structure and diversity and all these different things, right? And I also think of JWB and I think stability, right? Like they have these long-term investments that have a consistent return.
Yep.
They provide stability, and it's impossible to miss out on that human touch and the amount of empathy that they lead with. Do you think that is a direct correlation to that stability and avoiding crisis? And is there something there?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's everything. When we were doing the inclusion analysis, one of the aspects of that was I interviewed probably about 50 to 60 different people. And you have an organization of, roughly 80 to 100 people. And so I'm interviewing almost all of them, right? And I was asking them some pretty pointed questions. What is it about JWB that, when you think of JWB, what do you think of? What are the things that you're most proud of? And they mentioned things like, individual tenants that were going through a rough time and how they would actually help them through that time, maybe with some rent abatement or with some, different creative ideas where they weren't harming the owner of the real estate asset, but they also were not evicting someone who's a single mother with kids, right? They had situations where they would do lots of charity events, where they were building, Habitat for Humanity homes, and all of them showed up. The entire team showed up. And almost to the person, people talked about the fact that they really felt connected to the leaders, the owners, and each other in these moments where they were doing service for other people. And one of the things they talked about was, laying sod in the rain. It was a big, Greg's laughing because he knows exactly what I'm talking about. It was a big moment. And I think that holds true. They are a real estate company that has a conscience, that has a heart. And they have that for their clients, for the owners of the assets that they manage. They have it for their tenants. They have it for their employees. They have it for their partners. Really, it's a philosophy, people first philosophy. So, yeah.
I think you're right, man. You nailed our philosophy. We think that ultimately the reason why people invest with us is not because of the property. It's because of the team and the experience.
That's right.
If you believe that, then you make these types of investments. And it's a different thought process than most business owners, especially in real estate. Most people don't think that, right? But that's what we believe. And if you could, I know a lot of our listeners now don't have an organization of 80 people, but, they might have an organization of 1 or 3 or 5 and might have plans to get to maybe 10 in that real estate space. What would be some things that you think are incredibly important for a young but growing early on business owner to espouse if they do want an organization who obviously, can live these things out many years down the line? Put yourself in the mind of somebody who has maybe 1 to 3 employees and is going to maybe 5 or 8 over the next couple of years.
Sure, I can put myself in there easily because I am one. So I'm a small business owner, and the greatest advice I got was after some of the most difficult times when I started out my consulting firm. You can't be all things to all people. And so you have to decide what is the thing that you're going to bring to the table that you're going to do better than everybody else. Have a vision, be deliberate about what difference are you going to make in the world, and why should anybody care? If you can't answer those questions, the people that work for you aren't going to be able to give you their best. So the idea is make sure that you're really clear about what it is you're trying to accomplish, how you want to go about it, what kind of company you want to have in terms of culture, in terms of the way we treat each other, the way we treat the customer. And if I know that, then I can hire against that and make sure that I'm bringing in the people that are going to buy into this vision, are going to invest in that vision. And then I can reward them based on that. And I can also trust that they're going to work as hard as I will about making it come true. And the other piece is, and I can't emphasize this enough, you have to be trustworthy. People that work for you are trusting you. They're trusting that you're going to take them on a journey that they're going to want to go on. You're going to value their contribution. You're going to care about them as a person. And that you're going to be fair and look out for their well-being down the road as the company grows and gets successful. What's in it for them? And so paint that picture for people. If you can give people 3 basic things, they'll stay with you forever and they'll give you their very best. And I think that is a purpose. And the purpose comes from understanding what the vision is. The second is challenge. They have to be challenged, but they have to be given the tools and the ability to master that challenge. And the third one is autonomy. People want to be self-directed. Nobody wants to be micromanaged or told what to do all the time. So the extent to which you can give people that autonomy relative to their job and relative that's appropriate for where they are in their learning and development, if you can give people that, they won't leave for more money because they will find fulfillment where they are.
I think you nailed it there, brother.
Yeah, and as I reverse engineer what I've seen with my own eyes behind the scenes, right? Like I think of, all right, I think of their commitment to core values, right? Like having clearly delineated core values. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying this in the scope of like how someone can apply this now into their company, right?
Right.
Clear commitment to core values, right? Like have that written out and the mission of what they're doing. I see very clearly set expectations that aren't a daily task as much as outcome oriented.
Yes. Right.
And allowing people to go through that. And then it's that human element, right? Like, what else is missing there that, or is there another way to do that? Or have you seen an example of people trying to do that, but doing it wrong?
Well, I see one of two things happen. Usually people stay really inspirational, really high level. They fall in love with the latest management book that comes out and they try to apply that, or they bring in the latest consultant who's going to be the savior or is going to take them to some mountaintop. And they never actually get to the point where they're defining what it means for everyone else in the organization. It's just a really cool story, but we don't ever really get to where we can apply it and take action on it. The other side is we're all action all the time, and we're just a bunch of people running on hamster wheels without any real direction, without a cohesive strategy to tie us together. Strategy is more about what we're not going to do than what we are going to do. It's a series of trade-offs. So understanding how you have to have a strategy, which is your diagnosis of your business, the situation, your thesis of the market, all of that, and then how you're going to go about delivering that strategy all the way down to the cohesive action that you ask other people to take on. So I think you said it really well. And then, of course, the guardrails are things like values. I mean, there's lots of ways to make money. I could sell drugs and make money, but my values prevent me from doing that, right? So what are my values? What are the things that I think are important or not important? And so I think that's really important to define as well, because that goes a long way to defining the culture that you want to have.
I love that. What you just said about strategy is more defining what you're not going to do than what you are going to do.
And I didn't invent that, but I believe it.
Well, I love it. I love it. I haven't heard it before, so eloquently spoken, but I'm gonna attribute it to you from now on. So let's talk about strategy right now in this time of COVID, okay? And let's talk about, many real estate entrepreneurs have smaller businesses, and everybody has been affected by COVID. What are some things that you're seeing from small business right now that is allowing certain businesses to thrive at this point while other businesses are really struggling and losing their way?
So it kind of comes back to fundamentals, right? I think I shared with you a really great Harvard Business Review article where they looked back over the past, I think it was 10 different economic downturns, and they reviewed what were the characteristics of the organizations that seemed to come out of the economic downturn. You know, what were they like 3 years before and what were they like 3 years after? And they noticed some similarities. I'm going to move into psychology if I can for just a second. So the brain, the human brain, is designed through evolution to be very comfortable with things that are familiar, to be very comfortable with routine and things like that. So when we're confronted with something that we don't understand, we go into this fight or flight mode. And it's just wired. We can't help it, right? It's just part of our brain. And so when we go into the fight or flight, our judgment goes down. We drop back into these really defensive postures. And so most companies, most of my clients immediately furloughed, immediately downsized, which is understandable if that's part of a broader strategy. But if you're doing it just to be ultra conservative, that may or may not work for you. Lots of companies did this in this analysis. The ones that prevailed are the ones that beat the competition when the economic market turned up again, were the ones who did a couple specific things. Number one, they invested in innovation and assets. So during this time when everybody's freaking out, they were looking around for what's a good buy? What are the markets I should be getting into? Should I be acquiring these assets now when I've got a better, entry point? The other thing they did was they got really good about operational excellence and operational efficiency. So now's a really good time to look at what aspects of your service offerings, your products, maybe your asset holdings are not performing. And this is a time to probably consider clipping them loose, right? A lot of people don't want to do things like that because the value may be down and they don't want to lock in the loss. Totally get that, but that's a psychological roadblock that prevents us from moving forward coming out of this. So take the opportunity to clean up the balance sheet, to look at assets that aren't performing and turn them loose. And make sure that people are the last thing that you're cutting, right? If you're trying to get savings from your operations. Don't get savings from your people unless you have to. I understand more than anyone. I've had to fire thousands of people in my long career as an HR executive. I don't like it, but it's a necessary task from time to time. But those are the people that are going to help you move out of the economic downturn when the market turns around.
All right. So if we're talking in investing terms, or Greg, were you about to recontextualize there?
Well, I was just going to say what you're saying makes so much sense when I think about what JWB did during this downturn. You talked about looking at ways to innovate or operational efficiency. One of the clear examples is we looked at our leasing process and our rent collection process. Now, we had already made some of the steps to become self-guided showings for a long time. So we were very lucky. We were ahead of the game there. That helped. But we still used to sign lease signings, in the office, right? So we had to make some changes there, right? We used to allow residents to drop off rent in the office. Now, internally, we looked at that and said, we have to have so much more staff. We have to accept the check or the money order or whatever, the payment. We have to process it a different way. We didn't like it, but we did it because we thought is what we always did. So we looked at that and we've made some structural changes now. COVID has granted us the ability to do that and for it to be readily accepted. We're not going back on some of these things, right? But then we looked at some other things and we said, okay, does it make sense to change our strategy? When you talk about our team, not one person lost their job due to COVID. That was, we looked there last, right? Mm-hmm. That was great. But then we looked at this remote work environment, we are all itching to get back into the office. Many companies look at it and say, well, I'm going to be able to save some money because I'm going to have my whole staff go remote. That's not our mentality. We know that there may be some productivity gains for some people to be able to work remotely sometimes, but the overall gain is for people to come back in the office. So there's something that we look at and we say, that's not something that we want to change. But you got to look at each thing individually and make the best decision rather than just a blanket furlough people or blanket, we're going all remote type of a strategy.
And that's a great point, because you're basically putting everything on the table, right? And a lot of us approach things, we kind of get locked into these channels where, you know, well, this is how we've always done it. We just lived under the assumption that you had to take the check personally, right? Well, is that really true? Is that an assumption that is necessarily required? And so you put that on the table and sort of revisited that. To your point about having people working together, one of your greatest assets is the collaboration that you're able to get. I mean, there's this thing called team synergy, which is, you know, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts when you actually have team synergy. And you see it in sports teams all the time, right? You guys have that. You have this really magic ability to capture that. And you can only do that to the fullest potential when you guys are face to face and you see each other day in and day out. Thank goodness for virtual tools like Zoom and others where we can still meet and talk face to face, but it's not the same as being in the same room with someone. So that's a form of where your values become really important and you're just not willing to compromise those. And so that's a big point.
Yeah, and if I'm thinking as, which is my role here, is to think as one of the JWB clients, as somebody that may have a small real estate company, and I'm hearing, okay, so on the innovation side, maybe now is that time to take a little bit of extra effort and figure out that technology that allows you to communicate with people not face to face, right? Be it Zoom, be it social media, right? We had a whole episode on personal branding last week. Those types of things are not going to go away. And then I think about the other piece. So you said innovation and assets, right? Like I think of another thing that we've been talking a lot about on the show, which is you're looking around, what's the big opportunity right now for assets? And it's these low interest rates that are happening. So, you know, on a personal level, I just wanted to recontextualize that way. You know, if you are building a small, you know, practice, whatever you're doing with an organization, it's like, look into that technology, looking into the assets that you can acquire.
Great example. When I was the head of HR for the St. Joe company. And of course we went through the economic, you know, the real estate bubble burst. And so we're trying to figure out, what do we do? No one really knew how deep it went, how long it was going to be, similar to where we are right now. And at one point, we were entertaining an offer to buy all of AIG's assets. This was an entire real estate portfolio that was on the books for, I want to say something like $100 billion. And they were offering it for $1 billion and they would finance 90%. So if you could come up with $10 million, you could buy 100% of AIG's assets at that time. Now, at the time, nobody wanted to touch it because they didn't know what it included. But I mean, what's the risk on that if you have that kind of flow, you know, or if $10 million doesn't kill you? But those opportunities are out there now. What are they? What are the things that, you know, 5 years from now, we're going to say, man, I wish I'd had the courage to pull the trigger on that. And the hard thing is we don't know until we're in the rearview mirror, but it's worth a look.
So Rusty, every time I get to speak with you or my team gets to speak with you, you always have some really what is like groundbreaking, just like thoughts, data, maybe stories, whatnot. What's cooking in Rusty's brain lately? What are some things that people may not understand about leadership, culture, diversity, inclusion? What are some of those things that are top of mind for you right now?
So I have been watching our country, and I'm not going to get into any political statements here. I think that I'm noticing some trends with everybody, right? So the fight or flight thing is real. And we all kind of perceive things in our own way. So let me give you an example. There's this thing called unconscious bias. And so I'm doing a lot of work on unconscious bias right now. We all have it, right? Nobody is immune from it. So if someone accuses somebody else of, not embracing diversity, or maybe someone calls someone else a racist, right? Automatically, we have emotional reactions to that. We are defensive, fight or flight kicks into play. Our body's releasing cortisol and adrenaline. We don't hear anything else. And it takes your body about 10, 15 minutes to reabsorb those chemicals. And while that's happening, the risk and the threat that you feel is the same as you would if you were in the jungle and came face to face with a tiger. And you have no control over that, right? This is all happening as a result of evolution, right? The same is felt when people feel overlooked, when people feel like their voice isn't heard. And so you have two different viewpoints on every issue, and the same person may have different viewpoints depending on what the issue is, right? You can't divide people into two even categories. Everybody's unique and multi-varied, right? But the thing that happens is we deny the fact that this is our nature. We're not willing to acknowledge. Whenever you're dealing with unconscious bias, here, let me give you an example. I'm going to say a few things, like I'm going to say, what do you think of somebody who goes to church? What do you think of someone who owns a gun, who has a tattoo, who cusses, who votes for Republicans or votes for Democrats, is from the North, is from the South? Do you feel your brain sorting people left, right, swipe left, swipe right? And you're basically picking out aspects of those characteristics that are like you. And that's something that we all have, because we're born, and our body and our brain is genetically designed to feel comfortable with things that are familiar to us, because that allows us to survive, especially in the wild, right? But over time, we don't have the same threats that we did when we were in the savannah. So, but the genetic coding is still there. And so we still react to this way. The thing that drives me a little nuts is we don't realize it. There's a reason it's called unconscious bias, because we're not aware of it and it's affecting us. And we're not willing to really acknowledge it. So if you could acknowledge it, the first step is, yep, I have it. Everybody has it. There isn't a person who doesn't have it. The first thing is to acknowledge it. The second thing is to understand, what are the things that trigger me? What are the things that cause me to react in an emotional, alarming way? And then, is there a way for me to kind of get past it? I'll give you an example. In 1980s, symphonies went to blind auditions. And the reason was because they didn't have enough diversity in the symphonies. Female representation in symphonies went up 5-fold once they started doing that. Have you ever watched that show, The Voice? There's a reason that they turn their chairs backward to the person singing, because we all are victims of unconscious bias. How are you going to feel about somebody that applies for a job, Greg, that's 70 years old? Right? You have a lot of people that are young. I mean, is that something that you're going to react to positively, negatively, or neutrally? And understanding that, how do we set it aside and challenge those things? Oftentimes, we also come into data that conflicts our belief systems. And so, is that something we're going to listen to, or is it something we're just going to dismiss as a one-off? And we get into confirmation bias, and we could really spend a long time on that. I don't want to belabor it. But that's really the stuff I'm looking at right now.
Greg, can you give me, I want to test you real quick. So unconscious bias, how can we avoid that in real estate? Like what is, do people look at a beautiful house and then overvalue it based on instead of looking at the numbers and analyzing that deal? Or is it the other way around? Do they see an ugly house, like a neighborhood or whatever? Can you kind of work with that?
Well, I think we can take it from two angles. That type of bias that you're talking about, I think is pretty conscious. The ability for people to basically look at a house and be more inclined to want that house because of the way it looks is how most investors are kind of wired, right? It's a thought. They feel more comfortable. They feel in their mind, they look at what the house looks on the outside as delivering more security for them, even though there are a whole bunch of factors, of which the way that it looks on the outside probably is the least, or one of the least most important, that is going to deliver security for them. So you've got that we work with clients to to talk about becoming more objective. Because if you look objectively at your returns, that's how you're going to make your best decision, because you're not living in the house. So we go to great lengths, especially when clients do the client onboarding with us. It's all about, hey, can we make decisions based on the numbers? So there's certainly that bias. I think the unconscious bias is something that we've worked really hard at JWB to make sure that we mitigate as much as possible. And Rusty helped us do this through this predictive index that he mentioned. And so if you think about how JWB used to hire, we've won best places to work many times. So that's how we get a lot of interest, and people go onto our website and we get over 1,000 people submitting essays about why they want to work for JWB. We don't accept resumes. You just have to write an essay. And so we get this incredible amount of interested candidates. And so we used to do things like in-person meetings at one point, in-person interviews. We did phone interviews. And we said, well, is there some unconscious bias there? Because there's one person on our team who is responsible for listening, who's really the gatekeeper. And you know, when you have one person there, it is a part of every human being. So we said, is there a better way? We went to Rusty and we implemented the predictive index, and I'm sure Rusty can do a better job of explaining this. But to me, what it does is it aligns a person's kind of aptitude and what the best working environment and the best role for them. We match that to what we believe the best role is and the type of person we're looking for, and put it on a score basis. And we see how that lines up. And that's all done before anybody ever talks to anybody at JWB, right, or before anybody at JWB. So we've eliminated unconscious bias that is there in every single person. And we know that allows us to attract a diverse client, candidate pool, which we believe long-term benefits JWB tremendously.
Is that a good move for finding tenants as well? Like, do you find that is that applicable there?
You know, I haven't really considered that.
That's a good question. We should talk.
I don't know. I haven't thought about that.
All right. Then in that case, I'm going to just populate it here with Lee Bishop's question, right? So Lee Bishop has a question here, Rusty. And you know, I love that we've talked about psychology and the science and the mind. I know you're also a big culture guy. And Lee has a question about this, right? So he says, I love the way JWB treats clients like family. When Jane and I visited JWB, we saw kind of a sense of family in the team members of JWB. That is a hard item for a company to adopt, and it starts with leadership driving that and maintaining that feel. Was that something Rusty's team suggested when they consulted, or was that something that Greg and the founders kind of had in place that you saw Rusty and you decided to nurture, or is it all in the hiring process? What's your perspective on the culture at JWB?
Well, honestly, I'd love to take credit for it, but the truth is, you know, Greg, Alex, and the Adams decided that they were going to get together and build this company this way. And it started with Greg and Alex, and then, you know, Adam Riegel and Adam Eisman came on after that. And they all bought in. You know, everybody was aligned with how they were going to build this organization. And all of them really care about the people. And it's genuine. I mean, the clients feel it, the employees feel it, partners feel it. I mean, you really can't miss it. It's just really something. And it's pretty unique. I've got a lot of clients, and I don't find this in a lot of places. I have a lot of clients asking me how to create it, but, you know, it takes a level of commitment. So I think it was inherent to them. I may have put a label on it or defined it or measured it a little bit more for them, but it was always there. And the biggest thing that goes toward building that is trust. You got to have trust. The employees have to trust you. Your clients have to trust you. The management has to trust the employees. I mean, all the way around. And so that's something that they've really done a very good job building and maintaining over a long period of time.
What do you think are the mechanisms that enable that trust, Rusty? Is it all just consistency and clear expectations? Is there anything else?
I mean, fundamentally, it's consistent behavior over time, right? And so I trust that you're going to do what you say, and that you're going to live up to your word, and that you are going to keep everyone's best interests in mind, not just certain people or certain groups. But there's different types of trust. There's sort of ethical trust. I trust that you're going to be an ethical person, do the right thing, say what you mean and mean what you say. But then there's also, I trust that you are capable to handle certain things. I mean, when my kid was little, I trusted him that he was telling me the truth, because he didn't really know any better, but I certainly didn't trust him to swim by himself, so he had to have a certain amount of capability. And then at some point, trust is about delivering results. I mean, there's a lot of really good people who are honest and ethical and very capable, but when you put them in charge of delivering results, they just, for whatever reason, aren't able to do it. And so there's lots of different levels of trust, and I think that's something that they work on at all three levels.
All right, Rusty. Well, I mean, I think you bring up a valuable point, which is sometimes labeling what's going on is really, really important, right? Like even if that's what's happening, naming it adds a lot of power to it. So I kind of want to allow you to promote however somebody gets, if people are on this call, they just want more Rusty, right? Like, where do they go? What's the best way to connect
God
with
help
you?
if that's the case, right? I mean, my website is worksyn.com. It's WORKSYN.com. I work with lots of organizations, like I said, from 50 to 100 or 50 to 5,000 people. But a lot of my clients are even smaller, and I do individual coaching as well. So, my mission is to help people grow and develop and be the best that they can possibly be, whatever that is, right? And to help them get out of their own way when they want to do it. So I'm also on LinkedIn. Would love to meet and talk with whoever's interested.
All right, right on. We got one last here, kind of speaking point nugget question put in by Lee, and then we'll wrap things up. Lee Bishop asks you, Rusty, what would you say is the most important item for building a team for someone that is starting out in real estate investment? How would you advise someone to start building a team?
I mean, I can't overstate trust enough. And so that means, be somebody who is going to do what you say and say what you mean and mean what you say. Have that deliberate vision so that you're painting a picture for people, and let them decide, do you want to come on this ride with me or not? And if you don't, it's okay. I'm okay with that. You're okay with that, but good to know now. We all have to be willing to work together. An organization's a system. A team is a system. I push on one side and it bulges out in other places. So we all have to be aligned. I mean, you've driven a car that's out of alignment, right? You can get it down the road, but your gas mileage, your tread on your tire is going to go bad. You're going to feel exhausted when you get there. So how do we eliminate the friction? And we do that by having a clear goal, a clear vision, and making sure that we're being really transparent and helping people deliver their part and understand how what they do aligns to what we're trying to get.
And what I'd say too is, it has to be a deliberate thought if you want to build your business based on your culture. And it is a thought that takes many, 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 many years to see the return on your investment. And when you get there, the return on your investment is incredible. But, JWB started in 2006. And when Rusty was talking about, in times of downturn, focusing on assets and innovation, well, I remember those conversations that we had when we were going through a downturn. And we said, are we going to continue to hire? Are we going to continue to invest in our people while the real estate world is falling around us? And we all looked at ourselves and said, yes, we're going to double down on this because we believe this is the core that's going to make us great when real estate comes back. So you have to be deliberate. That may be the right approach for you and your business. And if that's the approach, I would recommend diving full in as early as possible. I would recommend talking to somebody like Rusty now, if you believe that that is going to be the core function of your business. With that being said, that may not be your core function. You may be like more traditional businesses and go in a different route where you don't make this huge investment. In my opinion, it would be a less of a payoff later. It'll be easier in the beginning, right? So I think you have to decide what type of business, a lot of what Rusty has been saying, decide what your purpose is, decide the business that you want to create. And if you decide that the culture is going to be the reason why people come and do business with you, start immediately, make that investment, because it's going to take 5 years, 10 years before you can really see the huge payoff. And then when you get there, it builds on itself. And that's the beauty of it. But it may not be for everybody. So you have to make that decision yourself.
if you don't define your culture and your purpose, others will define it for you, and it may not be what you want.
I think that's a perfect ending point right there, and a quote card that we're going to make for you, Rusty. I think that was fantastic. So thank you, gentlemen. This was amazing. Really, really insightful. Lee Bishop puts here, thanks for asking my question. I think Rusty and Greg have given huge insights on this webinar. Totally agree, Lee. I'm happy to be a fly on the wall here, just like everybody else, and really enjoy this. I want to encourage anybody that wants to take their education a step further, wants to, add a tool to the tool belt, to go to jwbwebclass.com, download that free investor kit, the 4 properties, get to know the whole business model. If you're going to really build something like this, it's going to be really, really useful for everybody. And I want to encourage everybody to join us on Thursdays. That is our Thursday Q&A section, where we have our red hot segment called the JWB Deal of the Week, where we break down, do it, Greg. Give me a sound effect.
Boom. There you go.
Where we break down a current property, that we analyze the finances, we look at it all, right, from the curb appeal to the cash flow of it, so you make your best decisions and you can flex that muscle of analyzing deals. I think it's really, really valuable. So I hope that everybody joins us on Thursdays. Join us in the group, jwbfacebookgroup.com. Rusty, I want to thank you, man. I feel like I just got way smarter in the last 45 minutes, and I'm going to give it up to Greg. Greg, great recommendation to bring Rusty on the show. I see now why you were talking about it so much.
I knew he was going to kill it.
And I'm going to leave it up to you to lock us down here.
Rusty, appreciate you being here, buddy. I just wanted to say thank you for spending the time with us today. But even more than that, I mean, I don't know if you know how impactful you've been to growing our company. And it's not just from the teammates that you've seen grow, that you've been a big part of leadership development and helping us with the compensation structure and helping with our bonus structure and helping with our ownership PTO. I mean, you've had your imprint on all of those things, and I don't know where our organization would be without it. But if I think of one thing that I don't know if I've ever shared with you that I'm so thankful about is, you have given the 4 of us a lot of confidence in our decisions. You've been that backboard when sometimes we have crazy ideas, sometimes they're not so crazy, but we come to you. And, that confidence that you give us, somebody who is close enough to JWB, that who we are and what we believe in, but also outside of the walls, for you to say, you know what, you guys are spot on, or you know what, you guys are a little bit off on this one, gives us the confidence to be able to make those decisions. And I appreciate our friendship and what you've meant to our company. And I would highly recommend others, if you're in a similar state and you're growing your business and you want to make culture, and you want to do things like from a comp perspective and from a bonus perspective and from a PTO perspective, you don't know exactly what the right thing to do is, talk to Rusty. He's meant the world to us.
Oh gosh, it's been such an honor to be a part of your organization. And the only thing I would say is, if I've had success with you guys, it's just been a reflection of really great leadership and a bunch of guys that care an awful lot. So thank you for the honor of being a part of it.
Wonderful.
With that, I'll try not to make it too weird, right?
Now we love fests here at the Not Your Average Investor Show. So we'd love to see you guys on Thursday. Rusty, I hope to stay in contact with you, and adios, everybody.
All right.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.